ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृतं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरों वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपां साग्रजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमः। ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। नमो महावदान्याय कृष्णप्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नाम्ने गौरत्विषे नमः। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। यस।
Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 29, Talks between Narada Muni and King Prachinabari. So we are at text 18 to 20. Thank you, Prabhuji. Krishna Prabhu. So we have done the translation, and translation describes the chariot body analogy in great detail, right? So we'll go ahead with the purport. Yeah, please continue.
The entanglement of the living entity in sense enjoyment is very nicely explained in these verses. The word samvatsara, meaning the progress of time, is significant. Day after day, week after week, fortnight after fortnight, month after month, year after year. The living entity becomes entangled in the chariot's progress. The chariot rests on two wheels, which are pious and impious activities. The living entity attains a certain position in life in a particular type of body according to his pious and impious activities. But its transmigration into different bodies should not be taken as progress. Real progress is explained in the Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Tyakta deham punarjanma naiti. One makes real progress when he does not have to take on another material body. As stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 19.138, Ita Brahmanda Bhari Ananta Jivagana Chaurasi Laksha Yonite Karaye Brahmana. The living entity is wandering throughout the entire universe and taking birth in different species on different planets. Thus he moves up and down. But that is not real progress. Real progress is getting out of this material world altogether. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 8.16, Abrahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravarti no Arjuna, Mam Upetteya Kaunteya Punarjanmana Vidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. Even if one is promoted to Brahmaloka, the highest planet in the universe, he has to come down again to the lower planetary systems. Thus, he is wandering up and down perpetually under the influence of the three modes of material nature. Being illusioned, he thinks he is making progress. He is like an airplane encircling the earth day and night, incapable of leaving the earth's gravitational field. Factually, there is no progress because the airplane is conditioned by the earth's gravity. Just as a king is seated on a chariot, the living entity is seated in the body. The sitting place is the heart, and the living entity sits there and engages in the struggle for existence, which goes on without progress perpetually. In the words of Narottama Das Thakur, Karma Kanda Jnana Kanda Kevala Vishera Bhanda, Amruta Baliya Yeba Khaya, Nana Yoni Sada Fire, Kadraya Bhakshana Kare, Tara Janma Adha Pate Yaya. The living entity struggles very hard due to the influence of fruitive activity and mental speculation and simply gets a different type of body life after life. He eats all kinds of nonsense and is condemned by his activities of sense enjoyment. If one really wants to progress in life, he must give up the ways of karma kanda and jnana kanda, fruitive activities and mental speculation. Being fixed in Krishna consciousness, one can become free from the entanglement of birth and death and the vain struggle for existence. In these verses, the words Mrugatrishnam Pradhavati are very significant because the living entity is influenced by a thirst for sense enjoyment. He is like a deer that goes to the desert to search out water. In a desert, an animal simply searches in vain for water. Of course, there is no water in the desert, and the animal simply sacrifices his life in an attempt to find it. Everyone is planning for future happiness, thinking that somehow or other, if he can reach a certain point, he will be happy. In actuality, however, when he comes to that point, he sees that there is no happiness. He then plans to go further and further to another point. This is called Mrugatrishna, and its basis is sense enjoyment in this material world. Hare Krishna.
So this chariot body analogy, Srila Prabhupada explains the entanglement of the living entity and especially in sense enjoyment is very nicely explained here. So the chariot runs for days after day, weeks after week, year after year, samvatsar after samvatsar, and then the living entity uh, that he is progressing through his life. Right. It's very simple. Like all of us, we remember one distinct day when we were in the fifth standard, or got 12th ka result, or got married, had a child, which are like 20, 40, 60 years down the line. But the chariot has come so far. But this progress is not real progress, right? Real progress is not just becoming aged in the body. The real progress is reviving one's Krishna consciousness. And ultimately, one is out of this samsara, tyaktva deham punarjanma, naiti mameti sorjuna. Right. Not receiving another material body is real progress. Otherwise, one goes to the first standard and goes to the 10th, and in the 10th exam, again one fails and again goes back to in between somewhere. Somebody will go to the fourth standard, somebody will go to again LKG, again the journey starts. Similarly, human form of life is to get out of the material entanglement and not to create another attachment, to accept another body and be the part helplessly part of that evolutionary process. So real progress is not just having a better material life. Real progress is getting out of this material world altogether, right? So this is Srila Prabhupada mentions. And then Srila Prabhupada quotes, across the universe, a Brahma Bhuvanan Loka Punaravartino Arjuna. It is not that we'd never become a demigod, right? No. A living entity starts his her journey as a demigod only. Most of the times as a great Brahma. And then, based on the conditioning, one will be revolving in this cycle of Brahmanda Bhari Ananta Jivagad Chatur Laksha Yonite Chaurashi Laksha Yonite Karaya Brahman. One is constantly going up and down. So there is nothing called as a better material position, right? Being illusioned, one thinks he is making a progress. At the same time, one is bound by the laws of material nature. And just like the aeroplane is bound to come back to the earth, just cannot fly forever. Similarly, the living entity is bound to come down wherever he goes in this material world, within this 14 planetary systems. And thus the living entity sit in a chariot like a king. But what is the plight is that is struggling extremely hard, right? And out of this struggle, what he is attaining? Nana Yoni Sada Fire, getting different forms of the life. Correct. And then Kadarya Bhakshana Kare, sometimes eating this, sometimes eating that. Just imagine, the somebody nowadays, these days are the days of cockroaches. Somebody becomes a cockroach, and then what he must be eating. Prabhupada was in France, and somebody asked Prabhupada, look at the life here. It is so fantastic. And Prabhupada said, yes, very nice. Use it in Krishna's service. But if you lead the life the way you are leading, in the same France, you will become a cockroach, and some France lady will spit on you, and you will be sitting in some, uh, what is that? The basin. So this is Kadariya Bhakshana Kare, attains different forms of the life, eats whatever is compatible in that form of the life, eats all kind of nonsense, and is condemned by the activities of sense gratification. And this is how the living entity is constantly in the pursuit of receiving something, and that is called as Mriga Trishna. Why Mriga Trishna? Because the Mriga, Prabhupada explains here, this is called as Mriga Trishnan Pradhavati. Pradhavati is constantly running. Mriga Trishna, living entity, is influenced by the thirst for sense enjoyment, like the deer in the desert looking for the water where there is no water at all. Similarly, living entity, Jivatma, is actually searching for Krishna, right? He has that darshan of the Lord, he has smelled the Lord, he has touched the Lord, he has absorbed the Lord for eternity. But somehow he's caught in the material world, and he's looking for the same touch. He's looking for the same, the experience that he had in the spiritual world, but he is not going to receive that experience here. And therefore it's constantly Pradhavati. Pra is intensifier. Pra, Pradhavati, constantly running from one place to another, and without realizing that Trishna will not satisfy him, only Krishna will satisfy him. So Mriga Trishna comes when there is forgetfulness of the Supreme Lord Krishna. Text 21. संवत्सरे चण्डवेगः कालो येनोपलक्षितः तस्याः नीह गन्धर्वा गन्धर्व्यो रात्रयः स्मृतः हरन्त्यायुः परिक्रान्ता षष्टोत्तरशतत्रयम्. Translation.
Translation: what was previously explained as Chandavega, powerful time, is covered by days and nights named Gandharva and Gandharvis. The body's lifespan is gradually reduced by the passage of days and nights, which number 360. Purport: the word Parikrantaya means by traveling. The living entity travels on his chariot day and night during a year consisting of 360 or more days and nights. Life's progress is taken for the unnecessary labor required to cover these 360 days and nights of life. Hare Krishna.
So Narad Muni is now further explaining who is the Chandavega. So Chandavega is nothing but is the time personified. Chandavega's attack on the city. And this is being explained from text 21 to 24, how the Chandavega is going to attack the city. That is previously explained. And the Gandharvas and the Gandharvis, they are the day and the night. And this is how they are attacking the city in the form of days and the night, 360 days, 360 nights. Prabhupada writes or more, because modern calculation is 365. Vedic calculation is Adhik Mas, right? And the life's progress is taken taken for the unnecessary labor required to cover the 360 days and 360 nights, right? So this is the explanation of Chandavega. कालकन्या जरा साक्षात् लोकस्तां नाभिनन्दति स्वसारं जुगृहे मृत्युः क्षयाय यवनेश्वरः. Translation.
What was described as Kalakanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age, but Yavaneshwara, Yavanraj, who is death, accepts Jara, old age, as his sister. Purport. Encased within the body, the living being accepts Kalakanya, old age, just before death. Yavaneshwara is the emblem of death, Yamraj. Before going to the place of Yamraj, the living entity accepts Jara, old age, the sister of Yamraj. One is subjected to the influence of Yavanraj and his sister due to impious activity. Those who are in Krishna consciousness and are engaged in devotional service under the instructions of Narad Muni are not subjected to the influence of Yamraj and his sister Jara. If one is Krishna conscious, he conquers death. After leaving the material body, he does not accept another body that is material but returns home back to Godhead. This is verified by Bhagavad Gita 4.9.
Yeah. So now the next is Kalakanya Jara Sakshat. So Kalakanya is nothing but the old age, Jara Sakshat. And then no one wants to accept the old age. But Yavaneshwara, the Yavanaraj, who is the death personified, accepts the Jara old age as his sister. And thus in the purport Srila Prabhupada explains, Kalakanya old age is just before death. And one is subjected to the influence of Yamaraj and his sister due to the impious activity. So that one can see actually, to the degree the person is pious, to that degree, one will not have the effects of these harsh material realities so much on his life, right? So, and if one is Krishna conscious, he will become Mrityunjay. He will conquer the death, as explained in, the Bhagavad Gita 4.9. That is, he will Tyaktva punarjanmaneti mameti sorjuna. He will go back home, back to Godhead. So to become really Mrityunjay means to become Krishna conscious devotee. That is the meaning of becoming Mrityunjay. Otherwise, there is constant cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanudarshanam. So the real Mrityunjay means one who conquers the death. So one who conquers the death means one who conquers the process of birth and death. So attains the spiritual life so that there is no more death. Text 23 to 25. आधयो व्याधयस्तस्य सैनिका यवनाश्वराः भूतोपसर्गाशरयो प्रज्वारो द्विविधोज्वरः एवं बहुविधैर्दुःखैः दैवभूतात्मसम्भवैः क्लिश्यमानः शतं वर्षं देहे देहि तमोवृतः प्राणेन्द्रियमनोधर्मान् आत्मन् अध्यस्तनिर्गुणः शेते कामलवनान् ध्यायन् मम अहमिति कर्मकृत्. Translation.
Translation. The followers of Yavaneshwara Yamaraja are called the soldiers of death, and they are known as the various types of disturbances that pertain to the body and mind. Prajvara represents the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold, typhoid and pneumonia. The living entity lying down within this body is disturbed by many turbulences pertaining to providence, to other living entities, and to his own body and mind. Despite all kinds of turbulences, the living entity, subjected to necessity of the body, mind, and senses, are suffering from various types of disease, is carried away by many plans due to his lust to enjoy the world. Although transcendental to this material existence, the living entity, out of ignorance, accepts all these material miseries under the pretext of false egoism, I and mine. In this way, he lives for 100 years within this body. Purport: in the Vedas it is stated Asango he ayam purusha. The living entity is actually separate from material existence, for the soul is not material. In Bhagavad Gita, it is also said that the living entity is the superior energy and the material element, earth, water, fire, air, and so on, are the inferior energy. The material elements are also described as bhinna or separated energy. When the internal and superior energy comes in contact with the external energy, it is subjected to so many turbulences. In Bhagavad Gita 2.14, the Lord also says, Matra sparshastu kaunteya shitoshno sukha. Because of the material body, the living entity is subjected to many tribulations brought about by air, water, fire, extreme heat, extreme cold, sunshine, excessive eating, unhealthy food, maladjustments of the three elements of body, kapha, pitta, and vayu, and so on. The intestine, the throat, the brain, and the other parts of the body are affected by all kinds of diseases that are so powerful that they become source of extreme suffering for the living entity. The living entity, however, is different from all these material elements. The two types of fever described in this verse can be explained in contemporary language as pneumonia and typhoid. When there is an extreme fever in the body, there is typhoid and pneumonia, and they are described as prajvara. There are also other miseries created by other living entities. The state exacts taxes, and there are also many thieves, rogues, and cheaters. Miseries brought by other living entities are called adibhautika. There are also miseries in the form of famine, pestilence, scarcity, war, earthquake, and so on. These are caused by the demigods or other sources beyond our control. Actually, there are many enemies of the living entities, and these are all described to point out how miserable this material existence is. Knowing the basic misery of material existence, one should be induced to get out of the material clutches and return home back to Godhead. Actually, the living entity is not at all happy in this material body. Because of the body, he suffers thirst and hunger and is influenced by the mind, by words, by anger, by the belly, by the genitals, by the rectum, and so on. Manifold miseries encircle the transcendental living entity simply because he desires to satisfy his senses in this material world. If he simply withdraws from activities of sense gratification and applies his senses in the service of the Lord, all the problems of material existence will immediately diminish. With the advancement of Krishna consciousness, he will be freed from all tribulations. And after giving up the body, he will go back home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna.
Now Narad Muni is explaining the followers of Yavaneshwara. They produce various types of disturbances within the body and mind. Prajvara will produce the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold. And the living entity thus is disturbed by many tribulations pertaining to the threefold miseries, Adhyatmika, Adhibhautika, Adhidaivika. But still he goes on making so many plans in the material world without realizing that he is transcendental, Paropi Manute, Anartham. But still, out of ignorance, he thinks that he is the material body and his identity of me and mine, I and mine, false egotism. And in this way, the living entity lives in this body, for the lifespan. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the Vedas, they describe Asangoyam Purusha. Asanga, that the living entity is separate from material existence. And however the living entity may try to mix with the material existence, the living entity is incompatible with material existence. It is just like the oil and water mixture. However we try, oil will remain oil and water will remain water, right? Because they are bhinna. Material energy is made up of the Ashtadha, but the living entity is Parastasmatu, is beyond the material elements, living entity. And this combination of material internal energy and the external energy that creates many tribulations. Srila Prabhupada's very beautiful record. And this creates an incompatible situation. Prabhupada very beautifully writes, speaks about this. And this incompatible situation comes in the form of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi. Living entity is transcendental, beyond birth and death. But because the matter has birth and death, matter begins and matter ends, the living entity also assumes the form of matter and thinks now he has also taken birth, thinks that he is also going to die, and thinks that he is becoming, all the material transformations the living entity absorbs on himself. Right. So, and thus goes through the different conditionings. Prabhupada writes here, because of the maladjustment of the three, Kapha, Vata, Pitta, there will be problems with every part of one's body, intestine, throat, brain, other parts, and different types of diseases. And these are the sources of extreme suffering for the living entity. And then there is Prajvar, excessive cold, excessive heat. In contemporary language, Prabhupada says pneumonia and typhoid. And there is extreme fever in the body, right? And all these miseries, these are produced by the bodies, and then there are miseries produced by the mind. These are called as adhyatmika suffering. Adhyatma means oneself. Self means body also, self means soul also, self means mind also. So the miseries produced from body and the mind, they are called as adhyatmika miseries. Then there are adhibhautika miseries, the miseries given by other living entities. And the first of that misery in Kali Yuga is the taxes, right? So GST is at 18%. Whatever you earn, 30% goes to government. And Kali Yuga is known for taxes. Dasyu Raj Kulesacha. Fortunately, we have a good government, but taxes are anyway very high. And whatever one can save, then there are many rogues and thieves, right? In Pune, last one financial year, more than 2,000 crores are being lost simply by clicking a link, right? So all these digital scams and everything. So there are many different types of thieves, rogues, and cheaters who will cheat. And then out of this, somebody has some spiritual interest, then there are spiritual rogues and cheaters. We have heard the stories of Nasik Kharat and all those people. So therefore, Kali Yuga is called as very, very unfortunate because there will be cheaters at every stage. And therefore, that's why Srila Prabhupada gave these very strong four regulative principles. No meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit sex. And anybody for any pretext asks one to break one of these regulative principles, instantly he should be rejected. That is, that was the instruction of Srila Prabhupada. And then there are miseries coming from Adhidaivika. Adhidaivika means coming from the Devata. There will be earthquake, famine, tsunami, so on and so forth. And all these miseries, but they actually belong to the material existence. And this miseries, the living entity simply has to realize that he is Atman, Aham Brahmasmi. And instead of trying to identify with the matter and enjoy the matter through the senses, right? Living entity has to use the senses in the service of the Lord. Rishikena, Rishikesha Sevana. And when he does that, then he will be free from all the urges or the influence by the mind. One is suffering by the hunger and thirst. One is, the suffered by the words of the people. And all these manifold miseries, they can come to an end by the direct process of devotional service. Prabhupada writes in another book, the direct linking process of devotional service is so powerful that simply by being engaged in the service of the Lord, one can make complete full stop to all these different kinds of the miseries. And thus, one can complete one's life, and which Prabhupada writes in the previous purport, for a devotee it is the last life in the material world. Somebody asked Prabhupada, Swamiji, what is the difference between Karmi dying and a devotee also? Your devotee also will die, right? And Prabhupada said, yes. But the devotee is dying the last death. What a beautiful statement. Prabhupada said, a devotee is dying the last death. Right. So, and then one can return back home, back to Godhead. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you,
Yeah.
Prabhupada.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
everyone.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes,
Haribol.
Prabhu.
Prabhuji, in this text 22, I think it's 20, 18, 21, it is stated Karma Kand, Jnana Kand has to be given up.
Yeah.
So Karma Kand is okay, but why Jnana Kand?
See, what is
Jnana Kand?
Jnanakant? Yeah, Jnanakant doesn't mean that pursuit of the knowledge. That is not the meaning of Jnanakant. Jnanakant means performing ritualistic ceremonies so that one can have a higher, better material life. So, Jnanakant refers to the Vedic portion, and 96% of the Vedas is filled with Karmakant, Jnanakant. Where you do this yagya, you will go up, you will do that yagya, you will go. Okay. And when this Karmakant advances more and more, then it becomes Jnanakanda is, oh, just realize you are the Supreme. Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi. And then what happens is that person is in the illusion that he is the Supreme and wastes this beautiful opportunity to be engaged in the service of the Lord. And therefore, Jnanakant here more precisely refers to the impersonalistic knowledge, the knowledge which is just explained as impersonalism. That has to be given up.
Okay.
But it
Thank
is
you.
not jnana to be given up. Jnanavan mam prapadyate. We are reading Bhagavatam every day, studying Bhagavatam every day. Is it Jnanakant? No, it is Bhakti Jnana. So there is a difference between Bhakti Jnana and Jnanakant.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhupada.
Period.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.